So this is how I'm structuring my training for the year of 2025 to facilitate my snatching, squatting, sprinting, bodybuilding goals, and some little bit of cardiovascular work. So it's become apparent to me in the last year or so that I've inadvertently become a hybrid athlete that might trigger some people, offend some people. I don't really mind. I wouldn't really call myself a hybrid athlete, but if we look at this on paper, it does seem to be as such. So I want to break down the week, not necessarily so that you can follow it, not necessarily that I think you should go do exactly what I'm doing, but maybe you could use it as some inspiration for your own programming, some information, maybe even a little bit of motivation. So to quickly touch on goals, to give you an idea of why the week is structured as it is, my primary goals at the moment are snatching and back squatting. They're the two primary goals that I want to push currently, while still following the secondary and tertiary goals as follows. So a bigger snatch and a bigger back squat, and that is going to remain the primary goals for the foreseeable future, certainly at least for the next 6 months, I would imagine. So the training will look quite similar to this. Secondary goals then are to push my plyometric work and my sprinting ability. These are goals that I don't want to compromise my primary goals of snatching and squatting, but I would like to improve them within reason. So if it gets to a point where I can't push them any further because it's going to jeopardize my squatting and my sprinting, then I'm totally okay with that. But they are goals that I want to move further along. This looks like vertical jump, 40-yard dash are the two primary ones I'm doing. I pushed the box jumps quite far last year and I hit an all-time PB on those, so I'm quite happy with that. But the vertical jump and the sprint at the moment are things that are primary occupiers of that. These will also, in a small way, support my snatching and squatting goals, but not a huge amount. I would be fine without them per se. Then the kind of tertiary goals are to continue to improve body composition. This will go quite well at 1 and 2. Sprinting and snatching are improved by being leaner, more muscular, but also probably a bit lighter. Jumping and vertical jumping are also improved by that. Squatting, for me, as long as I stay over 100 kilos, the difference on my squat between 100 and 110 isn't really massive. Now, if I got down to 95 or less, then my squat is going to be somewhat affected. So as long as I'm in the 100 plus kilo category, my squat is fine, so I don't really need to worry. I have a lot of room to adjust in regards to body weight there, so I've another couple of kilos to go. Then the last kind of goal is general cardiovascular fitness. This is something that I would use to support my other training. General health, and should jiu-jitsu return, will also support that. This is something that obviously supports just general training capacity, supports my body composition goals and hypertrophy work, and is something that is good long-term for health, which is something I didn't always do in my 20s in terms of cardiovascular conditioning work, and is something now I am putting a pretty sizable amount of time in compared to what I would have done before. So let's look at the structure of the week. I train 7 days a week, but don't take that at a face value immediately. Once we finish the week structure, I'll explain why the 7 days a week isn't actually a massive issue and why some of these training sessions aren't massive training sessions. Mondays and Fridays are longer conditioning days, or aerobic days, where I'm looking at about an hour on the bike. How I structure this currently in regards to how I progress them is, first of all, if I'm not feeling super fresh, if I'm feeling a little bit tired, or I have a bigger day planned the day after for my snatching and squatting, then in this day I am going to somewhat auto-regulate this and taper it back quite aggressively if I don't feel amazing and I want to conserve some of my resources. If I'm feeling particularly good and everything is going quite well, generally the metric that I'm currently recording for myself is calories per hour in this hour time frame, how many I've burned. Now, whether this is accurate, whether this is something that is actually meaningful, doesn't particularly matter. I'm just using a heart strap, a heart monitor. This gives a caloric value. Whether that value is actually accurate doesn't matter to me because it's consistent and I'm using it every week. The goal currently is to get about 1,000 calories or more done in an hour. I'm very, very close to that. Usually my heart rate is around 125 beats per minute, and then if I feel like I'm making good progress, I'm feeling pretty fresh, towards the end of that hour I'll push that to about 135, maybe for the last 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes if things are going quite well. And then Mondays and Fridays are these longer sessions. Now these sessions are actually in place of where my jiu-jitsu used to be, but since I broke my foot I haven't gone back to jiu-jitsu. My promise to myself was that I wouldn't return to jiu-jitsu until my foot was fully healed, and that is almost there. I think my foot is about 95%. That long tail of the healing from the foot is actually something that has taken quite a while. It's improving very well, and it improves very well, of course, but there is still some days where it can be sore, or a random position might send a jolt of pain. And so due to outside responsibilities, jiu-jitsu being a lower goal of mine, I can't risk re-breaking my foot. Foot breaks are something that are quite high common occurrence. When you break your foot, it's very easy to re-break them, specifically compared to other areas. So I'm cautious with this. So my promise to myself was that I wouldn't return to jiu-jitsu until my foot was fully healed. I'm also super conscious that my snatching and squatting is going really well, and the rest of my training is going really well. And while I have my 30s to hit these goals, hopefully I won't take all of my 30s, I won't, and probably don't want to have my 40s to continue pushing big squats and snatches and clean and jerks if that happens again, and big jumps, for example. Now, will I still do those in my 40s? I'm sure I probably will, but it's unlikely that I'll want to, or possibly even be able to continue to do those into my 40s and beyond. So now is a time when I'm athletic and younger to hit these goals. Jiu-jitsu is something I can do possibly for the rest of my life and get benefit from it. Same with weightlifting, but for me, I don't want to be a world champion in jiu-jitsu. I don't want to hit astronomical equivalent of numbers in jiu-jitsu like I would in weightlifting. So for me, I'm okay with this deficit in time. I don't feel like I'm, regressing jiu-jitsu. I really enjoy jiu-jitsu. I miss jiu-jitsu, but it's okay for now that it's delayed for a while. I will return at some point and quite slowly, but I have a long time for jiu-jitsu, but I don't have an indefinite amount of time for big snatch, big squat, big clean and jerks and stuff like that. So this is replacing those Monday sessions. I just sit on a stationary bike. You could go outside, you could go on longer distance, you could do running, you could do rowing, you could do a ski erg. For me, I enjoy the stationary bike, and I kind of enjoy somewhat pushing it towards the end. Tuesdays, Thursdays and Sundays are kind of what I consider my main training days. These are the bigger days, and these incorporate snatch, snatch pull and back squat. So all three of these days, Tuesdays, Thursdays and Sundays, are just snatch, snatch pull and back squat. These are the ones I want to push, and I do them in that order. Now, how I'm doing that and how I'm programming them follows general principles of weightlifting. I don't want to bog you down in this video in regards to those specific details, but it's higher volume, some variations, lower volume, heavier weight, less variations, go for a single, assess what's the problem, see what my technical deficits are, talk to Anton, see what his recommendations are, then reassess, start the block again. If you've been watching my training vlogs, you'll be acutely aware of what I'm talking about. Higher volume again, lower weights, try and progress those weights at the same volumes, or do more volume, go for heavy single, reassess. It's working quite well. Where so far we've returned to 147 kilo snatch, which is well inside 90%. So I'm very, very happy with that. So we'll continue as such. Snatch pulls are progressed via essentially a limiter based on how well the snatching goes. So if snatching goes really well, I'll usually match the weights, and if they feel heavy, I will not go too far beyond what I just finished snatching. So for example, if I just finished 8 doubles at 120 kilos, I'm probably going to stay around 120 or 130. However, if I finish a really good single at 140 kilos on the snatch and the weights feel light on the snatch pull, I'll push on to 150 or 160 for a couple of triples. At the same time, throughout the block, I will progress the pull. So at the start of the block, I won't go very, very, very heavy. But if somewhere near the latter third, maybe the latter 3/4 of the block, I might push those a little bit further into maybe the 160s or 170s if they feel good, as long as the positions are correct and the barbell speed is somewhat decent. Squats, as you've seen, hopefully from that other video where I talked about pushing them, are pushed 3 times a week. Very, very, what I would consider low volume. Maybe some of you might consider it moderate volume. And I'm pushing these usually quite consistently for 3s and some singles. I've reintroduced 5s recently for that higher volume section of the block. So no 8s or 10s. Given that the squat is going really well, considering that I'm still technically sub-maximal, and given that I'm doing it 3 times a week, I find that the 5s are sufficient for now. Whether that will be in the case in the future, I am open to it. If I wanted to push my squat faster, I would definitely do higher volume work now, higher volume sets, for example, and try and push it beyond there. But given that the sprinting and the snatching and everything is going quite well, and the jumping, that I'm splitting that volume out over 3 sessions, more efficient and effective would be 2 sessions per week and pushing the volume a little bit more. what you'll often find with this 3 times a week, the way I'm doing it now, is that very often one of those 3 sessions will be what I would call a kiss me ass session, where I'll come in and I might do one triple at 200. So I'm really just regulating those with the intention that each week either the volume is progressing or the weights are progressing. Hopefully you watch that full video and it's going quite well. I still have numbers that I've planned out and they're usually quite consistent, and I'm doing this because there's a lot of other variables at play. If I wanted to push the squat further, obviously I would focus in on it, plan it a bit more meticulously. But at the moment, obviously I'm very adept at my own programming and training. And if you map those numbers out, you'll see a very distinct progression of volume and intensity. The traditional strength training, nothing crazy is going on there, but I do auto-regulate it a little bit because I do want to make sure that the snatch gets a little bit more preference. So if there's days where I've had a good snatch session and I know I might have a bigger one later in the week, I might taper back the squats a little bit, but then there's times when I want to push that squat, so I'll push that a little bit further as well. So that just leaves Wednesdays and Saturdays then as my days where I'm doing upper body, accessory, bodybuilding work and core, and I also do my power training here. So this will either be my jumping, plyometric work or my sprinting. The sprinting at the moment is something that I need to be a little bit cautious from. So I added sprinting in a bit too soon after I broke my foot and definitely irritated that foot a little bit again. So sprinting at the moment is just 1 session per week. As we've talked about before, the track that I was using, the best thing to be running on with spikes, has actually closed down. It closed down last year, mid last year, you might remember. So I'm looking for a new track to go to at the moment. As I don't really have a great place to run on set distances that's feasible to use on flat ground, I've been doing hill sprints once a week. This is good and bad for me. So it's good for that lean and that acceleration phase of the sprint, but it's somewhat bad for me because I regress to choppier, shorter steps. So I have to be super conscious of getting longer steps with the hill sprints, because one of my issues is that feet want to go a little bit shorter when I'm sprinting, and it's not a good habit for me. So it's a balance between getting good times, getting that good acceleration phase, but also being conscious that the hills are going to force you to pull your steps in just a small bit. So I need to be conscious of doing that. So we are looking for a new track nearby. So we moved office recently. So I'm looking for somewhere that is useful, that I can get back on this track and the spikes, which is obviously much more forgiving on your joints and will give you better quality times and more consistent surface to sprint on, so which is better for the sprinting. Then for the vertical jumps, I'm primarily doing about 2 jumps per session or 2 variations. Usually what I'm doing at the moment is it's very, very simple. I'm doing either max effort counter movement jumps. So I might do 2 or 3 reps per set. I'll reset in between each one, and then I'll progressively put a bit more effort in over the course of about 8 to 10 sets. Usually no more than that. Once I feel like I've hit peak, and then if the next set starts to regress or the set after hits regression, then I will cap it there and keep it fast and productive. The extra variation or the second variation I'll often do either in the same session or during the week is really aggressive rebound jumping, where when I hit the floor, I immediately go into another counter movement jump, so I don't reset in between one. This will usually be done for 5 reps per set. And this will be slightly less volume per sets. It'll be somewhere between 5 or 6 pretty aggressive sets. These are somewhat fatiguing, very useful for vertical jumps. So I'll hit the floor and immediately change that direction again, really, really fast and aggressive, where I will try and change the direction as powerfully as possible. There's other variations I could use. I could start using depth jumps. I could use maybe single leg variations if I wanted, but these seem to be going quite well now. And I'm just kind of building back into, I think I'm either pretty close to where my vertical jump was before I broke my foot or exceeding it. I'm not too sure yet, as it was also something that I had to be cautious of adding back into training after I broke my foot. So the foot wasn't super fan of these rebounding jumps. Now it seems to be pretty happy, and I haven't had any pain after one of those sessions, which is great. I need to figure out a way here of actually measuring the vertical jumps. I'm pretty good at feeling how it goes. I'm pretty good at feeling how high the jump went and the speed and watching it back, but I would like an accurate way of measuring it. Obviously, a force mat would be great, but they're pretty expensive, and for a lower goal of mine, I'm not sure if it's worth the cash, but we'll see how it goes. In terms of bodybuilding, lastly, or hypertrophy work, usually what I'll do is pick some variations that I enjoy doing and do those for about 4 weeks. I'll be honest with you, I don't pick the most optimal variations. I don't pick the ones that are going to give me the greatest returns. Usually what I'll pick is the ones that I'll enjoy doing the most or what's convenient, and I'll do these for quite a bit of volume. Now when I say quite a bit of volume, This is in comparison to how many reps I might do snatching, how many reps I might do squatting or pulls. So 15 reps for snatching is a lot of meaningful snatches. 15 reps might be one set for hypertrophy work or bodybuilding work. So for me, what I'm doing here is, when I say high volume, I'm talking about 5 sets of 8 or 5 sets of 10 is a lot of volume on those. You may consider that a lot of volume. You may not consider that a lot of volume. And your favorite hypertrophy influencer might think that's terribly high volume. But usually what I'll do is the same movements twice a week, and then I'll rotate these about every 4 weeks. I'll find I'll get kind of bored of them. For example, currently I'm doing weighted push-ups, shoulder raises, I'm doing straight arm lat pull downs, and I'm also doing some horizontal rows with a resistance band, and then a lot of core work at the end. I'm usually doing leg raises and Superman planks, and I'll do these twice a week. These will take about 20 minutes, and it's something that I enjoy doing, but I also get quite quickly bored of those exercises, and I will change them up. And I think things are going okay there. So lastly, just on the idea of not having a rest day here, for me, I've really only 3 big training days per week. That's Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. The rest of the training days are, an hour of cardio at approximately a zone 2. Isn't really a high intensity cardiovascular day. It's good for building it, and sometimes I'll push it, but a lot of times I'll be honest with you, I'm just watching something for an hour. I'm watching a video. Sometimes I'll read a book for an hour. These are pretty low intensity, very good for heart health, general health. They're good for general conditioning for sport. I'm not breaking any wattage limits here. Sometimes if I feel like pushing it, I'll kind of zone in a little bit more and try and push closer for that calorie count. But it's a good level of conditioning, make no mistake, and it's much better than I would have been at any point in the last 10 or 12 years. But it's not exactly a high level of conditioning. It's not going to break any limits for anyone actually pushing their conditioning. So for this, these are pretty low effort training days. I find they don't impact the days after, and they're not really impactful by the days before. Only if I push them pretty far might they affect the day after. But to be honest, even then, if I push these really hard for an hour, even if I'm still hitting good pace, they're not even that meaningful. The power training sessions and that upper body session, so those Wednesdays and Saturdays, they're also pretty low effort, and usually those sessions are done within 45 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes some days. The jumping takes 10 minutes. If you don't include a warm-up, we've done a meaningful session in 30 minutes. I'll often superset my training, and I will get it done as quickly as possible. Sometimes I'll push towards maybe somewhat close to failure by the end of the last set, depending on how things are feeling. But this will often be with that same weight. So the weight might start out reasonably well. I'll keep good technique. And then by the time I get to the end of the 5th set, I'll be pretty close to failure, and that's sufficient stimulus for hypertrophy for me. The jumping, this is something that can't take long. Jumping sessions, if they're to be done meaningfully, cannot take a long time. So this is something that I will do within 10 minutes. Maybe 15 minutes maximum. The sprinting will take a little bit longer. Those sessions might take 15 to 20 minutes because I might have a minute's rest in between if we include the warm-ups. You're looking at 15 minutes for those and literally 10 to 15 minutes for the jumping. So those sessions are done pretty quickly. The upper body hypertrophy work, in my opinion, isn't very fatiguing, and it's not going to interfere too much with anything. If I start doing bigger movements like barbell strict press or something like that, I do find that it might be a little bit tighter, a bit fatigued the day after. So I kind of pick those movements selectively. I'm not pushing balls out for absolute maximum hypertrophy as possible. I'm doing what is feasible with that training. So those training sessions are often done 30, 45 minutes. I'm in and out. So they're pretty low effort, low fatigue. So in reality, I have 3 big training sessions a week, and make no mistake, after those big sessions, I am fatigued. Like, for example, a session where I do 8x2 with 120 kilos on the snatch. Yeah, I am, I'm pretty fatigued after that. They're the sessions where I might use a little bit of intra-workout carbohydrates to have good quality squatting after. But the other sessions, to be honest, are pretty low effort. I've been doing training for a very long time. I've been training since I've been 5 or 6, doing martial arts, Gaelic football, field sports, all these. I've been training weightlifting a lot for a long time. So in my opinion, while it's still daily training, 3 of these are meaningful, 2 of them are somewhat meaningful, and then the conditioning or the aerobic, the bike sessions are, barely presentable for training in regards to everything else I do. So hopefully that gave you an idea of what I'm doing and how I'm balancing things. Things are prioritized. and things are secondary or tertiary are definitely regressed if needed in that session. You know, if a jump feels really slow or I'm feeling really fatigued and I know I have a bigger snatch session the day after, I'll quickly cut the jump short. Or if the strict press is too heavy, I'll very likely bring it back, or whatever I'm doing. So things are always given priority to snatches and squats, then jumping and sprinting, and then composition goals, and then obviously lastly is aerobic conditioning. So they get their order, they're very aggressively regressed if needed to support the primary goal. We quickly see that while it's 7 days a week, it's not exactly hyper crazy training for a lot of that. It's been working very well. I also built up to that obviously over the last year or so, and as such obviously had a big year before that, doing lots and lots and lots of squats 5 days a week. So the tolerance to that on top of jiu-jitsu was something that I built up over a couple of years. But you definitely don't need to do this. You could add in the bodybuilding on those snatch and squat sessions, and you could have separate plyometric days, for example, and you could effectively do this over 5 days if you wanted. I just like training every day, but it's something you need to be cautious of, and we definitely won't be doing a training every day program in case you're wondering. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope it gave you some emphasis and kind of idea around what I'm doing at the moment, and hopefully it gives you some ideas what you might need to do with your own training.